The door she never meant to knock on. The rain began just as Ayla Rahman realized her wedding was a lie. Only minutes earlier, she had stood beneath crystal chandeliers, her ivory dress shimmering under the lights, believing she was hours away from becoming Ayla chic. The hall pulsed with music and polite laughter, but the sound felt distant now, hollowed by the words she had overheard behind a half-closed door. Ryan's voice, low, hurried, irritated. "You promised you wouldn't make this harder, Sana. After tonight, things will settle." Ayla had not meant to listen. She had been searching for him, worried when he failed to appear for photographs. But then came the reply, soft, wounded, intimate in a way that turned her spine cold. "I've been waiting for you to choose me," Sana said. "You can't marry her and pretend this never happened." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush breath. Ayla did not remember walking away. She only remembered the sensation of something shattering quietly inside her chest. When Ryan emerged moments later, adjusting his cufflinks with that practiced, charming smile, she saw him differently. Not as the confident entrepreneur she admired, not as the man who had promised her a steady future, but as someone balancing two lives with calculated precision. She left before he noticed her. Now the rain soaked the hem of her gown as she stood outside a house she once swore she would never approach. The brass numbers confirmed what she already knew. Zayn Malik, her enemy. She lifted her trembling hand and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, as though he had been awake, waiting for something he did not yet understand. Zayn stood in a dark shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, his expression sharpening from confusion to disbelief as he took in the sight of her. Mascara streaked, veil clinging to wet hair, bouquet missing. For a long moment, neither spoke. Of all the houses in the city, Ayla had come to his. Years ago, she would have crossed the street to avoid him. She had defended Ryan publicly when their companies clashed, dismissing Zayn as bitter and unprofessional. She had believed Ryan's version of every story, the sabotage allegations, the rivalry, the courtroom threats. Zayn had taken the damage quietly and rebuilt his reputation without spectacle, while Ryan celebrated what he called victory. Now Ayla stood on Zayn's doorstep with rainwater pooling at her feet. "I need help," she said, her voice barely steady. Zayn's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. Inside, the house was warm and orderly, devoid of the extravagance she associated with Ryan. The simplicity unsettled her more than luxury ever could. She became acutely aware of her appearance, the wedding gown that no longer symbolized hope but humiliation. "What happened?" Zayn asked, his tone controlled, not unkind. Ayla swallowed. The words felt like shards. He didn't stop seeing her. Zayn did not ask who. He did not need to. Instead, he studied her carefully, as though measuring the distance between the proud woman he once knew and the one standing before him now. "You found out today?" "I heard them," she whispered. "He was negotiating with her on our wedding day." The confession hollowed her out. Saying it aloud transformed suspicion into undeniable truth. Zayn moved toward the kitchen without another word and returned with a glass of water. The gesture was small, practical, devoid of drama. Yet it steadied her more than sympathy might have. "You shouldn't be here," she said suddenly, as if remembering the history that made this moment improbable. "You owe me nothing." He held her gaze. "This isn't about what I owe you." His answer unsettled her. There was no triumph in his voice, no satisfaction at her collapse. If anything, there was restraint, an effort not to speak the thoughts that might wound further. Ayla sank onto the edge of the sofa, clutching the glass. How long does someone have to lie before it becomes who they are? Zayn did not answer immediately. He leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed, watching her with a steadiness that felt unfamiliar after months of Ryan's charm. "Long enough," he said finally, "that you stop recognizing the person you thought you loved." The truth of it struck deeper than accusation would have. Her phone vibrated in her hand. A message from Ryan lit the screen. "Where did you go?" Guess her asking. There was no panic in his text, no confession, just inconvenience. Ayla felt something shift inside her. Not the frantic grief of betrayal, but a colder clarity. She turned the phone face down. "He thinks I'll come back," she said. Zion's expression hardened slightly. "Will you?" The question was not challenging. It was honest. For the first time that night, Ayla allowed herself to consider the possibility that walking away was not weakness. It was refusal. She rose slowly, the fabric of her dress whispering against the floor. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she admitted, "but I know I won't marry him." The words felt like stepping off a cliff and landing on solid ground. Outside, the rain began to soften. Zion straightened, as though acknowledging an unspoken shift. "Then tonight," he said, "you stay here. Tomorrow, you decide what comes next." It was not a romantic offer. It was an alliance born of circumstance, of shared history and quiet understanding. Ayla exhaled, the weight on her chest easing just enough to breathe. She had arrived at his door in desperation, expecting judgment or indifference. Instead, she found something steadier, something that did not demand performance. As thunder rolled faintly in the distance, she realized this was not the end of her wedding day. It was the beginning of a reckoning, and the man she once considered her enemy was now the only witness to the truth she had uncovered. When her phone buzzed again, this time with a photo attachment from an unknown number, Zion noticed the way her fingers froze before she opened it. Whatever waited on that screen would decide more than a broken engagement. It would decide who she became next. Evidence in the silence. The photograph erased any fragile hope Ayla might have preserved. She stared at the screen without blinking, as though clarity required stillness. The image was unmistakable. Ryan seated at a hotel terrace, his hand wrapped possessively around Sanaa's waist. The timestamp glowed beneath the picture like a verdict. 3 months before the engagement announcement. Not a lapse. Not confusion. A calculated overlap. Zion did not reach for the phone. He watched Ayla instead, as if understanding that the real damage was unfolding in her expression. Her shoulders straightened, not in strength, but in shock settling into structure. "How long?" she murmured, though the answer was already implied. The phone buzzed again. A second image arrived, closer this time, more intimate. There was no mistaking the familiarity between them. Ayla placed the device face down on the table with deliberate care. "He proposed to me while he was still with her." It was not disbelief that colored her voice. It was recognition. Zion stepped forward, his movements measured. "Do you know who sent it?" She shook her head. "No number saved. Private account." She exhaled slowly. "But whoever it is wanted me to see it tonight. Someone who doesn't want the wedding to happen," Zion said. "The wedding already didn't happen," she replied, a faint bitterness threading her tone. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, but heavy with implications neither rushed to articulate. Ayla felt stripped of illusion. The romance she had defended so fiercely now appeared as a performance she had been too trusting to question. "I ignored things," she admitted quietly. "Late nights. Locked screens. The way he'd shift topics when I asked simple questions." She met Zion's eyes. "I thought love meant choosing belief over suspicion." "And now?" he asked. "Now I think love requires truth." The statement lingered in the room like a newly discovered principle. Zion gestured toward the dining table. "Let's examine it properly." She hesitated only briefly before unlocking the phone again. Together, they reviewed the images. Zion noticed details Ayla had been too emotionally overwhelmed to process. The hotel's logo in the corner of a menu, the reflection of a date on a glass surface, the pattern of a reservation card barely visible near Ryan's elbow. "He didn't try to hide well," Zion observed. "No," Ayla said. "He didn't think he needed to." The realization landed harder than the betrayal itself. Ryan had operated under the assumption that she would never look closely. Zion retrieved his laptop from a nearby desk and opened it without ceremony. "If the photos are authentic, the metadata will confirm location and date." "You believe they are?" she asked. "I believe deception leaves patterns." He worked with quiet efficiency, extracting information from the files. The room glowed with the pale light of the screen, illuminating the focus in his expression. Ayla watched him and felt a strange shift in perception. This was not the resentful rival Ryan had described. This was a man who valued precision, who relied on evidence rather than narrative. Sent from a local device, he said after a moment. No manipulation. Data aligns with what's displayed. Her throat tightened. So it's real. Yes. The finality in his tone steadied her more than comfort would have. There was no room left for denial. Ayla leaned back in her chair. He once told me trust was the foundation of partnership. She let out a brittle laugh. I didn't realize I was the only one building. Zion closed the laptop and regarded her thoughtfully. Why come here? He asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. The question forced her inward. Because you're the only person who wouldn't pretend this is romantic tragedy, she answered after a pause. You would call it what it is. And what is it? A betrayal of choice. Zion nodded slightly, as though she had passed some silent test. Then the conflict isn't whether he cheated, he said. It's whether you accept the version of yourself that tolerated it. The statement struck deeper than she expected. Ayla had spent the evening focused on Ryan's actions, yet Zion redirected the lens toward her own agency. My entire family is at that hall, she said. They're waiting for an explanation. You don't owe them one tonight. I owe myself one, she replied. The distinction clarified something essential. This was no longer about embarrassment or public perception. It was about reclaiming narrative. Her phone vibrated again. This time it was Ryan calling. She stared at the name flashing across the screen. Once, that sight would have filled her with warmth. Now it felt intrusive. Are you going to answer? Zion asked. Ayla considered the question carefully. Avoidance would be easier. Silence would postpone confrontation. But postponement had allowed the betrayal to grow unchecked. She pressed decline. I'll speak to him, she said, her voice calm for the first time that night. But not while he thinks I'm cornered. Zion studied her expression and saw something shift. Grief crystallizing into resolve. You don't look like someone who just lost everything, he observed. She met his gaze steadily. Because I didn't lose everything. She glanced at the folded veil resting on the table. I lost an illusion. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the world washed and quiet. Ayla rose from her seat and walked toward the window. The city lights reflected faintly against the glass, steady and indifferent to personal catastrophe. She realized that the humiliation she feared was secondary to a more profound discovery. She had nearly bound her future to a man who underestimated her perception. Behind her, Zion remained silent, giving her space without retreating from presence. Her phone buzzed once more, but she did not look at it. Instead, she turned back to him. Tomorrow, she said, he'll try to explain. And will you listen? She held his gaze, her expression no longer fractured. I'll listen, she replied evenly. But I won't believe without proof. The decision settled between them like an unspoken contract. For the first time since the wedding hall, Ayla felt something close to control. What she did not yet know was whether confronting Ryan would expose only his betrayal or reveal something even deeper about why he had chosen her in the first place. And that answer, she suspected, would hurt more than the photographs ever could. The man at the door. The doorbell rang just after sunrise. Ayla did not flinch this time. She had been awake for hours, seated by the window in borrowed clothes, watching the sky pale from charcoal to silver. Sleep had felt unnecessary. Clarity had replaced exhaustion. Zion crossed the room without haste, his expression unreadable. He glanced at her once, silently asking permission. She nodded. When he opened the door, Ryan Sheik stood there in yesterday's suit, tie loosened, confidence strained thin beneath visible agitation. He looked like a man accustomed to controlling rooms who had suddenly lost his script. Ayla, he said immediately, stepping forward as if the threshold were irrelevant. What are you doing here? The question carried accusation disguised as concern. I could ask you the same thing, Zion replied evenly, not moving aside. Ryan's gaze sharpened. This doesn't involve you. It stopped being that last night, Ayla said, rising from her chair. Ryan turned toward her fully then, relief flickering across his face at the sight of her upright and composed. Thank God, he exhaled. You left without a word. Everyone's panicking. Your parents are worried. You should have thought of that, she replied calmly, before you started negotiating with Sanaa in storage rooms. The directness caught him off guard. His expression shifted from concern to calculation. You heard something out of context. I saw something in context, she said, lifting her phone from the table. Ryan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Photos can be manipulated. They weren't. Zion stepped back slightly, not inserting himself, but remaining present, a silent counterweight to Ryan's practiced persuasion. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, adopting the tone Ayla once mistook for vulnerability. I was trying to end it, he said, before the wedding. I didn't want to hurt you. The logic twisted in on itself. You didn't want to hurt me, she repeated. So you married me instead? I chose you, he insisted. Doesn't that count for something? The statement revealed more than he intended. Ayla studied him with unsettling calm. Chose me over her, she asked, or chose stability over uncertainty? His silence answered. The central conflict clarified itself, not as an affair, but as intention. Ryan had not been torn between two loves. He had been selecting outcomes, security, image, advantage. You proposed to me during your relationship with her, Ayla said. Was that strategy too? His irritation surfaced. Everything isn't strategy. Your business rival seems to think differently, she replied, gesturing lightly toward Zion. Ryan's gaze hardened at the mention. This is exactly why you shouldn't be here. He's been waiting for a reason to undermine me. Zion's voice remained steady. You overestimate my interest in your downfall. The composure unsettled Ryan more than hostility would have. Ayla stepped forward, reducing the physical distance between herself and the man she had almost married. Why me? She asked quietly. The question pierced deeper than accusation. Ryan hesitated. Because you're dependable, he said finally. You believe in partnership. You don't create drama. In that moment, she understood the architecture of his choice. He had not selected her for passion or devotion. He had selected her for predictability. I was safe, she translated. You were certain, he corrected. The distinction mattered. And Sanaa, she pressed. Ryan exhaled sharply. She's impulsive, emotional. She doesn't fit the life I'm building. So you built it with me while keeping her in the margins, Ayla concluded. His silence deepened. The truth was no longer hidden behind denials. It stood plainly between them. She had been chosen not out of love, but suitability. Zion observed quietly, recognizing the shift in Ayla's posture. Her shoulders no longer slumped with betrayal. They squared with recognition. I would have ended it, Ryan insisted, grasping for control. After the honeymoon, things would have stabilized. The cold practicality of the timeline chilled the room. Ayla felt something final click into place. Not anger, not heartbreak, but decision. You didn't lose me last night, she said evenly. You lost me when you decided I was the safer investment. Ryan stared at her, searching for the emotional leverage that once worked so effortlessly. He found none. This is temporary, he warned. You're upset. We can fix it. There's nothing to fix, she replied. Trust isn't repaired by convenience. The certainty in her voice unsettled him more than accusation ever could. He looked toward Zion, frustration sharpening his features. You're enjoying this. No, Zion answered simply. I'm witnessing it. The distinction stripped the situation of rivalry. This was no longer about competition between men. It was about a woman reclaiming discernment. Ryan's composure fractured. If you walk away now, he said, lowering his voice, you're throwing away everything we built. Ayla considered the statement carefully. We built an image, she corrected. You built a backup. Silence expanded. Outside, the morning traffic began to hum faintly. A reminder that life continued regardless of private collapse. Ryan straightened his jacket, pride resurfacing as defense. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Maybe, she replied, but it will be my regret, not yours. The finality of her tone left no room for negotiation. For a long moment, he remained where he was, as if expecting her resolve to falter. When it did not, he stepped backward toward the door. This isn't over, he said. Ayla met his gaze without hesitation. It is for me. Zion closed the door once Ryan stepped outside, the latch clicking into place with understated significance. The room felt different, lighter, yet charged with consequence. Ayla exhaled slowly, the weight of confrontation settling into clarity. She had expected devastation. Instead, she felt something steadier, autonomy. Zion regarded her thoughtfully. How do you feel? She considered the question. Like I finally understand the story I was in, she answered. But as her phone vibrated once more, this time with a message from an unknown sender reading, "There's more you don't know," she realized the conflict might not have ended at the door. It might have only shifted, and whatever remained hidden had the power to redefine everything she thought she understood. What was chosen? The message remained open on Ayla's screen long after the notification sound faded. "There's more you don't know." She did not react impulsively this time. The night had already stripped her of illusions. Whatever remained could only clarify further. Zion stood across from her, reading the shift in her expression without demanding explanation. "Another photo?" he asked. "No," she said quietly. "Just a promise." Her phone vibrated again. This time, a document attached itself beneath the message, an image of a contract page. Ayla enlarged it slowly, scanning the text with growing precision. The letterhead bore Ryan's company insignia. The date was set 6 weeks before their engagement. Zion moved closer, careful not to intrude. "What is it?" "A merger proposal," she replied. "Between Ryan's firm and my father's." Zion's brow tightened. "Your father never mentioned it." "He wouldn't," she said. "He rejected expanding into Ryan's sector years ago." Her pulse steadied instead of racing. The pattern was assembling itself with unsettling coherence. She scrolled further. An annotation in the margin, typed, not handwritten, read, "Engagement strengthens negotiation leverage." The words felt surgical. "So that's why," Zion said softly. Ayla nodded once. "I wasn't just safe." She swallowed. "I was strategic." The affair had wounded her pride, but this discovery cut deeper. Ryan had not merely balanced two relationships. He had positioned her as an asset. Her phone rang before she could absorb the full weight of that realization. Ryan's name illuminated the screen again. She answered this time. "What now?" she asked, her tone even. "Ayla," he began, his voice stripped of earlier arrogance. "Who sent you that file?" "So it's real," she replied. A pause. "It's a draft. It doesn't mean anything." "It means you intended it," she said. "You tied our engagement to corporate advantage." "That's how partnerships work," he insisted. "Families align. Businesses grow. You never asked if I wanted to be leveraged." "You're overreacting," he snapped. "It would have benefited everyone." "Everyone but me," she corrected. Silence met her words. "You said you chose me," she continued. "But you didn't choose me as a person. You chose what I represented. That's not fair." "It's precise." Across the room, Zion remained still, witnessing without interference. Ryan exhaled sharply. "Fine. Yes, it was part of the plan. But plans evolve. I would have made it real." "Made what real?" she asked. "Affection? Or ownership?" The question lingered unanswered. "You're throwing away stability," he warned. "Emotion doesn't sustain futures." "Neither does manipulation," she replied calmly. She ended the call before he could respond. For a long moment, she stood motionless, the magnitude of what she had uncovered settling into conviction. The betrayal was no longer personal alone, it was structural. Ryan had not stumbled into deceit. He had designed it. "Does your father know?" Zion asked. "No," she said. "And he won't," from Ryan. She walked toward the table where a folded wedding veil lay. The delicate fabric looked harmless, almost innocent. She ran her fingers across it once before setting it aside. "I thought love meant compromise," she said thoughtfully. "But compromise requires transparency. I was negotiating in the dark." Zion studied her carefully. "And now?" "Now, I choose visibility." The simplicity of the statement carried more strength than anger ever could. She retrieved her phone and dialed her father's number. When he answered, his voice carried exhaustion and concern. She explained everything, not dramatically, not defensively, but factually. Each sentence reclaimed narrative authority. There was silence on the other end, then a measured acknowledgement. "I trust your judgment," her father said finally. "Come home when you're ready." The response steadied her further. She ended the call and met Zion's gaze. "It's done," she said. He nodded once, as though recognizing that something irreversible had shifted. Outside, the day had fully emerged. Sunlight filtered through the windows, dissolving the shadows left by the storm. The world appeared unchanged, yet Ayla felt distinctly altered within it. "What will you do now?" Zion asked. The question no longer carried urgency. It invited intention. "I'll rebuild," she replied, "but not around someone else's blueprint." She moved toward the door, pausing before opening it. For the first time since arriving the previous night, she looked back at Zion without the residue of rivalry. "Thank you," she said, "not for shelter alone, but for steadiness, for clarity, for refusing to exploit her vulnerability." "You don't owe me gratitude," he answered. "You owed yourself truth." She considered that, recognizing its accuracy. As she stepped outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. The remnants of rain had evaporated, leaving the pavement dry and unremarkable. No evidence of the storm that preceded it. Halfway down the path, her phone buzzed once more. A new message, not from Ryan, from the same unknown sender. "He isn't the only one who underestimated you." She stopped walking, reading the line twice. It carried neither threat nor comfort, only implication. Ayla lifted her gaze toward the horizon, understanding that endings often disguise beginnings. The betrayal had exposed more than dishonesty. It had revealed the quiet power she possessed when she refused to be positioned. Behind her, Zion watched from the doorway, not pursuing, not retreating. The conflict that began with a wedding had unraveled into something larger, a reckoning with identity, agency, and intention. And as Ayla stepped forward into a future she had not yet defined, she realized the real story was no longer about who betrayed her. It was about who she would choose to become. The phone remained in her hand, the final message unanswered. For now.